Thank you very much, Harry. Good morning, everyone. Am I audible, Harry?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. I'm just going to ask everybody to just do a thumbs up just to see that all over 40 of us that have logged on time are alive. And yeah, I can see Alex, I can see Mahlako, I can see Gerard, I can see Kathy Bell, I can see Ben. All right, no, that's great. That's great. You are more than welcome to switch on your cameras as well for the time, these 2 hours. I'm pretty excited about today. I'm just going to do a brief welcome and just a brief introduction as to the purpose and the objective of this summit. I am Florence Msundwa, as Harry has introduced me, and I am the director and the founder of Grow Suppliers South Africa. I call it Grow Suppliers ZA, and also the director of the Road Freight SME Summit and Awards. So as Grow Supply, we've been in the space of SME development for the past 9 years. We offer a blend of research, advisory work, strategy, and also we create business linkage platforms for SMEs and corporates. And therefore, for us, this was just a normal step to go into in an industry that contributes so much to the GDP of the country, and also to see how we can also facilitate growth for SMEs in road freight. So as you have seen the agenda of the day, this is really just a snippet of what October is going to look like and the conversations that we are going to have during the 2-day summit that's going to happen in October between the 24th and the 25th. We also have a session that's going to be done by Oliver Naidu, that's going to talk to the awards and the categories of the awards. But about the purpose of today, so today it's really just to introduce to everybody within the ecosystem and to start engaging with the ecosystem about the summit and the awards. Most of you that have seen it, you will see that our theme is resilience. And this is where I would like to start. I would like to just talk briefly around why did we term it resilience? The dictionary definition of resilience goes as the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. So it's the ability to bounce back. And most of you that are on now, you are business owners. And as you would know, resilience is twofold for some of us. It's you as a person, and it's also the business that you are building, is how you are resilient, and also how your business can be resilient. So the purpose of the summit is really to start convening SMEs within the road freight industry, and for us to start having conversations about practical solutions of the various challenges that SMEs face in the industry, and secondly, to see how we can work together with the private sector and the public sector to create a more conducive environment for SMEs to thrive. Harry, I'm going to ask you to please put my slides on. I'm just going to briefly go through the objectives, the value that's going to be unlocked. I'm not going to be too long-winded because most of the information is on the website. Just go to slide 2, please. All right, so the event is designed to provide insights and industry best practices to improve the success rate of SMEs in the road freight industry, provide information that will enable SMEs to form and implement growth strategies for their operation. I believe every entrepreneur wants to grow and wants to scale. To foster collaboration within the ecosystem to support the growth of SMEs. And I think I mentioned earlier, interaction between SMEs, the private sector and the public sector, and also to unpack opportunities of both financial and non-financial business support for SMEs within the road freight industry. So that is what the event is designed to do. What value will be unlocked? The content is really going to be focusing on uncovering insights that can help every SME within the road freight. And yes, I'm aware that we are all transporting different commodities, but there are certain universal challenges that we all have. Assist SMEs with the necessary pragmatic, technical, and operational insights to enable them to scale their business. I think it doesn't matter where you are, you're always thinking about the next step. assist the industry to inform key policies on, support provided to SMEs, the regulation and the compliance elements. And lastly, assist in informing the design and the development initiatives of SME business development implementation programs within the industry. Harry, I'm done with the slide. I will also put my contact details towards the end. These are my contact details. You can take a quick picture of them, and you can email me, and you can go onto the website after that. That is the welcome address, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to the first of its kind, an initiative, a platform that is really geared to see how we can inform each other, how we can share best practices about how to grow our enterprises, or how you can grow your SME within the road freight industry. Without wasting any further time, I'm going to ask Tony Dalmeda, who is a consultant from the RFA, to just send out his message of support because they were supposed to do it at 11:30, but he has to dash off somewhere. So Tony, please switch on your camera and share your message of support. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Tony Dalmeda. I'm an office bearer at the Road Freight Association, and we're here to show support for this endeavor, and hoping that the resilience and sustainability of SMEs is something that we can help and foster that particular growth in our industry. The Road Freight Association on their website has an enterprise development platform, and anybody interested in filling in their details can go onto the Road Freight Association website, fill in their details under the enterprise development. Anybody interested in doing that can contact Cisely, CISELY, at the Road Freight Association, and the contact details for the Road Freight Association can be gotten from your convener for today. So from the Road Freight Association, thank you for the invite. The support is here, and we wish all the resilience and sustainability wishes to members on this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony, for that message of support. I needed to talk about something, and I'm going to just briefly talk about it now before I introduce our first speaker, which is Mr. Makubalo. As I was formulating and putting together this conference, I had to put together an advisory council, and I would like to welcome all my advisory council members. Can you please just give them a round of applause? These are people I bothered because they are experts in the industry, and the rationale around putting together an advisory council was that we need to have people that are in the industry, that have worked in the industry, that have experience in the industry, to help us, guide us, come into content, and to also advise us as to how we can conceptualize it and how we can execute the summit sustainably for years to come. That was the rationale around the advisory council. And I also asked Mr. Makubalo to share the advisory council because he has quite extensive experience within the space, but himself, he's the CEO of a group of business, but here I'll just say the CEO of MLM Logistics. He's both in logistics and also in mining. And I'm just going to hand it over to him. May we please welcome Mr. Makubalo with a round of applause. Yeah, I like Mashako. You're giving me good vibes, Mashako and Nolo. Thank you so much. Mr. Makubalo, sir, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Florence. I am audible. Just checking.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Langa Makubalo. I am the CEO of MLM Logistics and the chairman of this wonderful group of advisory members. The exciting part of these advisory members, as Flo had said, is that they come from different backgrounds, different experiences. We've got academics in there. We've got guys that are running practical businesses there. international businesses as well. So it's a very, 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 very exciting opportunity that we have here. I think firstly, I'd like to just re-emphasize on the point that this is the first of its kind. And I took keen interest into this because I've been in the industry for a long time, and I found it when I started very difficult to find my feet, purely because there was just nowhere to go. As a businessman, you try to get the funding right, you're trying to understand the principles right, and you try to understand the governance and the regulatory right. And you find that you've just got kind of nowhere to go and no one to bring you in and just give you a helping hand. So this is a platform that's been created. And I think the vision from Florence and the team really is to get everyone who's interested into the space to understand the practical side of the business, understand the benefits, call it that, of any business, but also some of the things and the milestones that you need to kind of go through to be able to become successful in this business. With that said, I want to focus on key critical factors that for SMEs in this space. And I'm going to go through them in a different kind of order, and I'd like you guys to follow with me. If there's a question, the orders of questions, program director, do they put up their hands, then they ask, or do we finish and they ask?
We will take Q&As at the end of the program, please.
All right, thank you. Firstly, let's talk a bit about the statistics. Let's understand where we are from a SME point of view. The understanding is that the SMEs play a very, very vital role, and they play a significant role in economic growth. We also understand that they make up about 91% of formalized businesses, employing about 47% of the country's workforce, which is a very, very big force. We also understand that the development and the sustainability of SMEs really plays a role in reducing the unemployment rate. South Africa's unemployment rate is extremely high. And the key to that is SMEs, meaning opening up a business and getting to employ 5 people who then employ another 5 people. And the idea here is for us grow and have enough kind of support. SMEs are the lifeblood of modern economies. I recently took a trip to China, and that was one of the first observations I had, was that they have government support for any business that starts. As soon as you start, government supports you through the process. The vision is clear, and they assist you in getting to the next level. That's obviously something that we're going to discuss later on. I do know that part of the program, the other speakers will talk into elements of funding as well, and so we'll jump into that. I want to quickly get into one of the key factors of making business successful, particularly in this space. And the understanding is nothing happens until something is sold. What does that mean? Well, number one, you can have the greatest truck in the world. You could possibly even have a truck that's mechanically perfect. You can have outstanding drivers. You can have drivers that are motivated to be able to load products on time and deliver them on time. You could have a great office structure with systems in place. You could have bookkeepers, you could have fleet controllers and managers. But the reality is that no one will come to you if you don't go out there looking for that business. So what does that mean? Well, one, you need to understand your business. You need to sit to yourself and say, how do I get to the next level? How do I form networks in this business? How do I make sure that I speak to the brokers, speak to the people who hire these trucks, speak to the people within the freight industry, have those networks that you're able to develop and pour in order for you to be able to move your product. When I had my first truck, the biggest thing was, one, I wanted a truck. I was a dreamer. I wanted a truck. I bought a truck. The second thing was, now what? And that's where we as a business and we as a community within the road freight need to assist each other. We need to form those networks among each other. I'm happy that we've got about 59 people here. My assumption and my thinking and my wish, in actual fact, is that the networks will happen here so that we can help each other. The key thing about logistics is moving the product. You need to be able to move the product from one point to the other as seamless as possible. Yes, there's certain key factors that affect you going there, and that's what we'll cover as we go on. One of the other things is obviously finance. Now, you need money to make money. It's a difficult conversation to have, and often as young entrepreneurs, you think that is the big, big thing. Ding, 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 money, 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 right? Now, how do you make money? Well, first of all, you need to have an asset. How do you acquire the asset? Oh, good question. Are there any support structures that allow me to acquire this asset if I don't have the money? Right? Oh, maybe they are. How do I make sure that I've got enough of what I have in my mind, in my vision, to be able to put in paper to access that funding? Of course, there's many loopholes and there's a difficulty in trying to get finance. One of the things that affect us, particularly small businesses, is that the access to funding on its own has become so critically important that it's the one thing that stops businesses from succeeding. I went to a seminar and someone said, well, if your business doesn't last for 2 years, you have no business. I said, well, and I said, what if it lasts after 2 years? He says, oh, well, then you have a semi-business. So, okay, well, if it lasts 3 years, aha, now you have a business. So obviously it's got to do with the ability of having finances, or at least a financial structure that can allow you to sell your product. So nothing happens until that product is sold, or nothing happens until you move your product. The second thing I want to touch on is the downtime. And downtime in this industry destroys your business entirely. What does downtime mean? Well, it basically means that the time that you've got to fix your truck from when it stops with a client's load to when it can move from that point to the next and deliver that product. That downtime is extremely critical. It is very expensive. It affects you as a business. And you need to find a way of how to determine or how to reduce that time, all right? Your success will be determined by the hours that you are on the road. So the more you are moving on the road, the more successful you become. When your trucks are down for repairs, or when you don't have a ready available driver, you lose valuable and irreplaceable time. You almost certainly have to have drivers for your trucks, but sometimes those drivers that you have, I often say, get sick and then you're stuck without a driver. And that also then affects your downtime all the time. So what are some of the things that you need to think about as you slow down the process of downtime? Well, one, you need to form relationships with mechanics. You need to form relationships with housing places that can assist you when your truck has stopped, right? The one thing that affected me as a business when I started was I just couldn't find a reliable mechanic. I couldn't find a reliable team because it was just a complicated environment that I had not been in. And I found that over a period of time, I would lose so much money because I'd pay a mechanic who would do something and he would do that, and then it would move to the next one. And the same thing would happen a few weeks down the line and eventually I'd lost so much money and it would affect my bottom line. That relationship or those relationships take time to build, but it's very important that you understand that you have to find a way to build it. And one of the things that I will emphasize on the 24th of October when we have the event is I will talk about support structures that I use that you can also use to make your business a success. The ability to tap onto those networks, particularly within the frame of mechanicals with parts and tires and helps your business succeed. And it helps you at least ensure that you have delivered the product. So half of the time, I used to make sure I take a product to the client without any problems. After I've delivered to the client, I will sort out whatever it is that I need to sort out. At least one thing that I've done is I've given the client what he needs. And the more you get bigger, you realize that that method works, but you need to extend it now. Meaning when you do work on a truck, you do the work as best as you can, because as soon as you've delivered, you need to then move on to the next client. You then need to move on to the next client, and you need to move on to the next client. So one of the things that I've taken is to make this a very practical approach, particularly in this launch. We need to make it a very practical approach for young entrepreneurs or even entrepreneurs who are in the space to understand that trucking on its own is a brilliant business. It's a wonderful business. But the question that you need to ask yourself towards the end of this summit, preferably today or even when we start on the 24th, is that, is trucking profitable? Is it a profitable business? That's one thing you need to do for yourself, understand it, and look at all the T's and C's to be able to answer that question. Once you can answer that question, then you're able to say, I can now apply myself to this business. As I said earlier, you need to move a product, so you need to sell something. Number two, you need to eliminate downtime as best as you can. Number three, you need to find ways of constantly having liquidity in your company, saving mechanisms in the business that can allow you to constantly tap on those savings, particularly for repairs and maintenance. I had a provision that I had, and every time I get a bit of money, I'd always allocate 30% to spare parts or 30% to whatever might happen, because in the trucking business, anything happens at any point in time. And this happens not just in trucking, but in any form of logistics. Things break all the time. Lastly, or second last that I want to talk about briefly is taking a pen and paper and really being honest with yourself about your business. One, what are the strengths of your business, the business that you want to do? It's trucking, you want to do logistics or whatever it might be. What are the key things that you yourself in your business, as you look at, are your strengths? And be honest with yourself and begin to write down just a little on the side of a page what your strengths are as a business. Second to that, then also get there and say, now, these are my strengths, but what are really my weaknesses? As I'd said earlier on, that you could have the perfect office, you could have trucks if you have to, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a successful businessman, particularly in this space. There's a lot of other things that you need to do to think about as you apply yourself in the business. And honesty with yourself is important. And that's why as a leader and a CEO, a managing director in your business, take a page, blank page, and write, these are my strengths as a business. These are my weaknesses as a business, all right? What really would be some of the opportunities I can reach on in this business, looking at my strengths and my weaknesses currently? And lastly, have a look at what are your threats, who's around you, who's trying to take over what is it is that you want, but also what are some of the threats around you, all right? I can tell you one of the things that I learned when I started was that ethics and regulations can affect your business than you can imagine, more than you can possibly imagine. One, the bargaining council. Two, you need to think about tax. You need to think about cash management. Those things, for example, as much as cash management is really just you, but cash management ensures that you pay your VAT on time. It ensures that you pay your employees on time. And those things affected my business. I found myself having to run to SARS 90% of the time trying to strike agreements. And that's because that I had to learn that if you don't prioritize and understand the legal requirements of an industry, you're going to burn in that industry. So those for me would be key things. And then the last and final point is government support. I struggled with government support myself. I don't know what's there out there, but we'll find out as the program goes. But I found that it was difficult for me to access government support. And one of the reasons was because I just didn't know what was out there. I didn't know who could extend a hand and help me. But I want to also talk to government officials that are sitting here. And I want to say that one of the things that will assist an SME in this business is at least a reduction of the license fees for the trucks. You know, those costs are so cumbersome on a business as small as ours, you know, where you have to transfer ownership from a truck to your name, from one name to another, is 15,000 Rand. You know, a roadworthy is almost 5,000 Rand, right, for your truck and your trailer. And I just found myself going through this process, thinking to myself, how do you find a way, continue in this business when you've got so many other costs that you need to manage? So regulatory issues are things to all constantly think about and constantly apply yourself to, as well as what government is doing to assist. Government reducing of license fees, helping us with understanding where we can get funding. Fuel rebates would help. 40% of your business is fuel in any logistics business, particularly in trucking. So these things are critical in to enable you to run a successful business in logistics. And further to that, I'd also like to say that I really commend everyone who signed up and jumped onto this summit. The 24th, 25th of October is going to be a wonderful time. There's a lot of exciting things there and learnings for all of us. And I'd like to encourage you to continue looking at this and getting yourself into this industry and understanding more about the industry, because it's a critical industry for you and I. And I wish you the best of luck. We will create something, I've got my hand up on that, mentorship programs around this, particularly for individuals and entrepreneurs coming to the space and the ones who are already in the space. Mentorship is key. And I, for one, had no mentor when I started, and I often see people that go through the process of mentorship in an industry like this, and the successes are just wonderful to see. So thank you for that, Program Director. Thank you so much to everyone, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark, for that introduction to set up the day. I think you have touched on the basics and the fundamentals, and them that have been in the industry for long are probably, you know, just nodding their head and remembering when they started and saying, oh yes, this is how it all began for me, and these are critical. And as we progress, ladies and gentlemen, through the program, we're going to be touching on different elements of you know, as to we're at different stages and what affects you at different stages. I'm cognizant that some people on the platform have a fleet of 5, others are at 20, others are at 50, others are at 100. With that said, I'm going to introduce our second speaker, which is Mrs. Shayna Gokul, who's really just going to look into the macro and the micro elements of the business case of SME development. I thought it was very important as to have a conversation of what is the business case, why is it so important. Mark touched on you know, unemployment rate within South Africa, and obviously this industry, you know, are contributing so much to the GDP. I think it's like 270 billion that the road freight industry contributes to the GDP of South Africa. With that, may we please welcome Mrs. Shayna Gokul, the business strategist and economist. Shayna, ma'am, the stage is yours. Harry, I'm sure you can share her slides.
Thank you so much, Florence. I'll wait for Harry to put up the slides. Thank you. Good morning, colleagues, and thank you for your time. Before I begin, I would like to share my background and shed some context on my new venture. Harry, if you could go to slide number 3. Thank you. I began in the industry at the age of 21, and by 25, I was the director of Gecko Group, which is an SME that operates across the continent. So I grew up in the industry, and for the past 12 years, I have experienced the difficulties of operating an SME in Africa. And in 2020, I decided to further my studies, and the journey made me realize that perhaps I needed to step out of the problem to be better able to solve it. So that prompted me to take a 4-month-long sabbatical last year, and actually a well-deserved break post-COVID, riots, flooding, studying, etc. I think it's safe to say that all of us that have been operating in SME over the past few years have been going through the most. And I made a decision to exit the operational side of the road freight sector slowly, though I'm still somewhat involved. My goal now is to focus on business strategy and the intersection of geopolitics and international trade. Knowing full well that road freight is the backbone of trade in Africa, not only am I reinventing the wheel for myself, but I think it's time to refresh the way we see and do things in the industry. I am currently building my firm called the Legend Group, which will provide strategic business advice and intelligence to African SMEs. And it will focus on how SMEs can capture opportunities in the market, upscale and optimize their operations while managing their risk. Now let's talk about SMEs. Next slide, please. So SMEs are the backbone of global economic development. Next. SMEs are the key drivers of the world economy, especially in developing countries. And according to CSIS, they account for 90% of the private sector. Next. In Africa, SMEs provide more than 80% of jobs on the continent. Next. And in sub-Saharan Africa, especially, SMEs, there are approximately 44 million SMEs where micro enterprises hold the largest piece of the pie. So according to World Bank estimates, 600 million jobs will be needed by 2030 to absorb the growing global workforce, which makes SME development high priority for many governments around the world. In emerging markets especially, most formal jobs are generated by SMEs and are estimated to create 7 out of 10 jobs worldwide. So it's clear that in order for Africa to meet its milestones as a key contributor to the global economy, SME growth and development needs to be at the forefront of all economic decision-making. So we need to start pressuring the system by asking, why are SMEs left on the margins in Africa while infrastructure, government, and financial support is centered around our larger counterparts? For instance, the port systems are developed around the needs of blue chip multinationals, which those of us who are using the port actively are privy to. It's very difficult to get in there as an SME and to make the system work for our operational needs. Regulatory barriers are streamlined across the sector. So naturally, SMEs would be drowning in paperwork. And those of us that are entrepreneurs and have limited resources, we find ourselves drowning in this paperwork on a day-to-day basis. And it's really difficult for us to focus on how to actually upscale and grow our businesses. Finance agreements are often prejudicial against smaller players. And access to finance is a big conundrum for us, as Mark mentioned previously. Banks get their fingers burnt with the larger enterprises and then they take it out on the smaller ones. There's also lack of flexibility in the system and it's driving many SMEs out altogether. I think it's been really sad for those of us who have been in the sector for a long time to see the number of SMEs, key players who have been in the industry for a long time actually calling it quits and, making the tough decision to exit the sector completely. So on that note, I think let's dive into some of our international counterparts and see how they're taking SME development forward. Next slide, please. So according to Strive Community, which is an initiative by MasterCard, data shows that India, Indonesia, Nigeria, the United States, Bangladesh, Brazil, Japan, Mexico, Italy, and Egypt have the greatest number of SMEs in the world. And India leads at the moment with 75 million SMEs in their country alone. Though Indonesia and Nigeria are the top 2 respectively, by the number of SMEs per 1,000 people. But the number of SMEs does not necessarily translate to growth or conducive environment for startups and SME development. That is why on the graph you will see the top 10 countries with the largest new business formation, attributed to inclusive governance, digitization, and other favorable incubatory conditions that have contributed to the surge in startups and SMEs in those particular countries. And in the UK, for instance, 99% of businesses are SMEs, and they've developed what they call the SME action plan that integrates the SME sector into the economic planning of the country. So the focus is on sustainable growth, on driving innovation, encouraging entrepreneurship. Good governance, of course, recognizes the potential for SMEs to scale up. So remember, the reason that we're all here, as previously mentioned by Florence and Mark, is that we all want to scale up. It's also very concerning that no African countries are on this list. So according to the World Economic Forum, the COVID-19 pandemic actually acted as a catalyst for innovation among SMEs. And at the forefront of this innovation is digitization. And I think in Africa, there's a misconception because we're so used to seeing everybody with access to their phones and social media that it is not actually an issue on our continent, but access is limited and a vast majority of the population still does not have access to internet. So these are some of the crucial issues that we need to address as SMEs, because the more we scale up and the more we digitize, the more we'll be able to streamline our processes and take our businesses forward. Next. So I always like to benchmark SME data against India because it is the largest, it obviously has the largest number of SMEs in the world. And in India, SME success is attributed to the following factors. There is a strong entrepreneurial wave backed by government intervention. And government is hell-bent on SMEs being the driving force of India's output. And it recognizes that SMEs face the same challenges as large enterprises with a fraction of resources. There's also high priority for SMEs, especially in the manufacturing and technology sectors. And technology-driven advancement, the plug-and-play technology, is at the forefront of the agenda because they know and they recognize that digitization is what enables SMEs to scale up faster. Availability of skilled labor at a low cost, but I'm not going to tap into that today because I think that we need to have a completely different platform for that. And the robust infrastructure that India is developing for the SMEs as well, which I think is getting there on our continent, but also deserves its own platform for further discussion. Next slide, please. So if you would like, you can drop some suggestions or some input advice in the chat box and talk about what are the barriers preventing your organization from scaling up. And I think for most of us, we don't want to go into detail too much about it because we live it on a daily basis. Mark also touched on most of it quite well. But I think the lack of infrastructure and the wear and tear on our vehicles as a result of the lack of infrastructure is something that's really plaguing SMEs as the cost of repairs and maintenance becomes increasingly concerning. We've seen it over the past 12 months, just the cost of tires, the cost of repair maintenance contracts. Those are things that are very worrying for us as SMEs. And I think also the limited access to finance. Next. Limited access to finance. And I mentioned previously, and I spoke to Florence when we first started engaging about this platform, I think it's really important for us to get banks to the fore and for them to understand that SME issues are not the same as multinational or blue chip issues. And to paint us as the same with the same brush is doing us a disservice, because for the most part, there are SMEs in the road freight sector economy that are doing what is the best they can to keep themselves compliant. But there's still some hurdles that we need to overcome in terms of the administration that we need to put forth with the banks that disables us from actually getting the part of the finance that we require to scale our businesses up. And a lot of banks are closing their doors on SMEs. They're becoming a lot more stringent. The annual review processes are very taxing on SME owners and entrepreneurs. And these are some of the things that we need to start engaging actively with the finance sector on, so that we can hopefully turn it over and try to see how we can also crowdfund or source funds from the private sector. Try and brainstorm and see where we can fill the gap for SMEs. I also think restricted market access is something that is a huge challenge for us, because we know that the greater your number of trucks that you have in your fleet, the greater your chances are of getting certain contracts, etc. And that really is not a very conducive way to look at the sector or to engage with SMEs. So that's something that is a challenge for most of us. Regulatory barriers, which Mark did touch on quite nicely as well. And then, of course, the market volatility. When China's going through Chinese New Year, or there's some major shift in the global economy, we experience it firsthand. So how do we help ourselves along during these periods of quietness where our bills keep piling on and then we go into negative cash flow cycles? Next slide, please. Next. So I think it's not all doom and gloom, and there are endless opportunities in Africa for SME growth and development. And some of the major continental transformations we need to think about is, firstly, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, because it's not just a buzzword. I think in the recent past, there's been some good movement on it. But most importantly, we need to strengthen the readiness of SMEs, and we need to engage them with the deeper goals of the agreement and empower them to be the first to maximize on the opportunities and tools at their disposal. Next. Those of you who are fans of geopolitics will notice that there's a reconstitution of international trade dynamics. So while the world decouples with their usual trade suppliers, i.e. China, everyone wants to get married to Africa. So why? The world can see our potential as a continent, and the wealth of minerals and resources that are critical to the clean energy transition is basically going to take us into the next era. But I think what we do with that drive and how we manage it at a micro level and a macro level in Africa is going to determine how well we do as a supply chain. Are these countries just going to come and extract these minerals and then develop their supply chains in on their respective continents or in their countries? Or are we going to do the work and develop our supply chain so we can see maximum benefit from this new drive? A clean energy transition, next please, is a determining factor for the next decade, I would think. And we're seeing a lot of discussion around multipolarity and the reconstruction of the key global players. And I think a lot of discussion is centered around where will Africa feature in these new dynamics moving forward. And I think the impact of collaboration and the importance of embracing the new era of multipolarity is something that we really need to discuss at a micro level and see if we can institute a sort of localized version of multipolarity where SMEs are reinventing the wheel and starting to also, reintegrate themselves with the key players so there can be a lot more equality across the board. I think we also need to translate the intersecting of geopolitical multipolarity into the supply chain. And we need to rebrand the way the sector views us and force the sector to embrace SMEs as headliners, as we do occupy the majority seating. So all in all, I think the point of this presentation is that we need to globalize our thinking as a sector. And how do we localize global trends and use them to shift paradigms? The overarching theme of this presentation is reinventing the wheel, decoupling our thinking from the norms that have led the industry for decades. Those ways of working and modes of thinking keep us in a vicious cycle of mediocrity. And I think a factory reset is in order. So this platform is one of the ways that we can reinvent the wheel. I think the trust deficit that plagues the industry is also outdated, and there is danger in conducting business in isolation, speaking to Mark's point about creating a community that we can all rely on for the next era of the supply chain and the reconstitution of the supply chain on the continent. And I think in conclusion, you know, Africa is the girl she thinks she is. And I think there's this incomparable interest in our continent, but we're struggling to get over our exes and enter into the era of knowledge and knowing our worth and doing the work. So I think a good thing to think about as next steps is, you know, collaboration in practice. And I think it would be nice at the end of this to take suggestions from the audience on how we can decouple our thinking and shift toward an era of coupling and knowledge sharing, and how can we honestly take charge as SMEs in the sector and shift paradigms to garner institutional support for SME growth and development and SMEs as a business case in South Africa and on the continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shayna. Could we please give Shayna a round of applause? She did a whole shabazz with her slides, the graphics. Thank you so much. That was so comprehensive, so detailed. And I think you really hit the nail, you know, when you talked about the different macro and the micro challenges and the importance for SMEs within road freight to make sure that, you know, you collaborate and we can have one voice. I also just want to emphasize something before I move to the next speaker. When I was asked, you know, by various people as to what the objective was for the summit, I said, it is about creating value for the industry, and the summit and the awards are not gender specific and neither are they race specific, but they're SME specific. And that is what I really want everybody to understand, and how we're curating everything. It's not related to only a particular gender or a particular race. It's about, as SMEs, we need to scale, we need to thrive, and how we're going to create this value for the industry, and how we're going to create our organizations and make sure that our organizations grow. And even as leaders, how we're going to constantly become resilient. I am also very cognizant that within our crowd today, you know, there's people that have been in the industry for long, and I'm going to call on to you to please reach out to me, because I really would like to get into the institutional knowledge that you have, you know, and the experience that you have in the industry, and for you to be there in October, and so that there could be a great exchange of best practices and a great exchange of information and possible solutions for SMEs within the space. With that said, we will move to our next speaker, who's going to talk about just resilience from a good governance and an ethics perspective, and that is Ntate Kamogelo Mampane. As I mentioned earlier, you know, I said resilience is at an individual level, and resilience is at a business level as well. And ethics and good governance are very critical in making sure that you're making your organization resilient for certain things. I think both Shane and Mark spoke about regulations, they spoke about compliance. And with that, Ntate Mampane, are you ready with your presentation? Ntate Mampane is the CEO of TK Global Experts and the Executive Director of the Supply Chain Council. He's also the founder of the Pan-African Supply Chain Awards. He has decades of experience in supply chain. He plays a very fundamental role in the different regulation policies and the formation, therefore, and recommendations coming to the enterprise supplier development space. And he's done extensive work, you know, in making sure that corporates diversify their supplier databases. So with that, could we please just welcome Ntate Mampane? He's going to also help us in October as to access to market, because that's all of us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Memusunda, for inviting us to join you here. Yeah, so we'll share a little bit of the work that we're doing in different industries. we are a multidisciplinary organization, and the experience that we are sharing definitely comes from different sectors. We've done quite a lot of work with SMEs in the mining industry, the engineering sector, and of course, in public sector, there's about 1 trillion rands of value for small businesses that small businesses can participate. But we're also helping supply chain professionals to reflect on how they interact with small businesses, because quite often, while we still, as small businesses, we have to create and develop resilient companies that are agile, that are able to go through different challenges, some of them for the first time in history of mankind. We can do a lot as supply chain professionals, enterprise professionals, to make it a little bit easier for small businesses, and we'll continuously assist both on the regulatory side, but also in the behavioral side, how we interact with small businesses. We're reviewing, for example, a lot of contracts, agreements, terms and conditions that are negatively impacting small businesses. We've learned, for example, the subcontracting issues that we are having, and especially in the logistics industry, the impact that has, and especially if the main contractor is not being paid, and all of that, the ripple effect that it has on all other partners in the economy. While we want to have new entry, we want innovation. Really, there's a lot that we can do as supply chain professionals ourselves, and we'll definitely share with you some of our experiences. We have seen the impact of those decisions in the past 3-4 years, the impact to price, the impact to product and services, sustainability, availability. So we really have to do a lot in supply chain, especially in organization, except in supply chain organizations has to be elevated to a different level, so that the right decisions are made at the right level that impacts the communities. The previous presenter spoke well about supply chain and the SMEs. So I'm not going to discuss, and it's good that we spoke about our slides earlier on and the impact, so that we are able to streamline our conversations. Supply chain strategies are changing and have changed drastically over the past 5-6 years. And we have seen an escalation of automation of businesses, especially in the past 3 years. And this is going to be, we are going to see the increase, especially in certain industries. While industries are reducing their dependencies on certain types of commodities or even certain types of industries to accelerate their production. And unfortunately, as we all know, that in South Africa, the growth has been, we have not seen, we've been sitting at a 0 and a 1% growth, and mainly because of the impact of geopolitical issues that we are all facing, but also availability of some of the raw materials and commodities. And obviously, when companies do not expand or grow, obviously that impacts SMEs. But when they change, we have to make sure SMEs that we are agile and are able to respond to those changes that are happening. The reason why I'm showing you this slide is that this is a true reflection of how our value chain, and this is across the board, across industries, are looking like. So if 10% of the wealth of South Africa is sitting only in about 10%, 63% of the wealth only sitting at a 10% of the population, this is exactly how our value chain also looks like. So 80% of the services are being rendered by multinationals in the country, and also large entities. So SMMEs, we have to think differently if we are going to participate effectively. If we are going to bring a serious competition to the current large organization, we really have to think differently. And we are seeing that especially some of the big organizations are also starting, and here I'm thinking of someone here, I'm not going to mention by names, that as you grow, as you buy more trucks and more trucks, you become more vulnerable to being bought out. So and now we'll talk about that governance, because it's very important that when you build your businesses, your organization, your goals, your visions are also very clear in terms of where you want to see yourself and where you want to see your own organization as well. As I said, across industry, and this is not only in the logistics, in the construction or manufacturing. You can clearly see that across industry, the SME participation can do better. I mean, if you look at the largest participation is around the businesses, the business services. But if you look at the construction, manufacturing, even transportation, of course, we understand that South Africa, it's almost an oligopolistic economy. So we do have that challenge. So those that are doing business, and if you want to start a little bit of, if you are a startup or you want to grow, you have to review this and ensure that if you are going to select a particular industry where you already have enough participation of SMMEs, you have to come up with a different value proposition. But there are other industries, for example, forestry and fishery, where we see quite a nice growth since 2013, about 6% growth. But there are other areas, for example, community and social, only 30% since 2013. So it really helps you as an organization, as a business, if you want to ramp up your growth, or if you want to be innovative in what you do, because every industry seeks different solutions. And this is very important that you also understand, and your value proposition talks to the industry that you want to operate in. We do not have a lack. I mean, the previous presenter said that, and I'm not going to waste your time on this, but we do not have a lack of small businesses in the country. 84% of businesses that are registered in any kind of a database in this country employ 1 to 10 people. So they are small businesses. Now, why businesses fail, and this has been repeated quite a lot, but I think it's very important that we repeat it again, that we have seen, as Memusunda said, the biggest challenge that kills a lot of SMMEs is this thing that is called access to opportunities. We have seen a lot of money being spent on development, and once the development program ends, we see small businesses closing shop because of the dependency on one client. And we are going to talk about that as well as part of governance. And of course, we are not going to overemphasize the issue of procurement legislation and regulations and the payment structures that companies are putting. But also on the other side, sometimes SME, we are also culprits of this, and we'll discuss it just now. This is an example of a governance structure for a 4PL group. And there's certain things when we evaluate SMMEs, you will ask, for example, do you have someone who's dedicated on compliance or risk management? You find that a lot of suppliers, obviously, they will say, well, we do not have capacity. So this is a corporate structure. But as an SME, you have to think about what are the key areas that I want in my businesses. And by the way, this does not in any way say that for every single block, there must be a head or there must be a bum in a seat. Not necessarily. Let me make this as an example. Depending, as a small business, you are probably not a 4PL organization. So it does not make sense to build up a structure as if you are a 4PL organization. Right? If you are a 2PL organization, perhaps your structure will be more leaner as compared to a 3PL structure, right? But certain components of the governance structures are very, very important that as SMEs, you have to find a way of bringing that capability. Certain things can be outsourced, yes, but for growth and sustainability, there's certain capabilities that it does not make sense to outsource. So we're going to talk about 6 things: your vision, your medium to long-term planning, being agile. And one of the most important things that I believe most of us can learn from is to stop, reflect, and learn. And unfortunately, because we are running and there's deliveries, phone calls from customers, waiting for delivery, waiting for our trucks to come in, we hardly ever pause and reflect and learn from this journey. We took a journey. What were the lessons from this particular journey or from particular route? Is it possible that maybe we change the way we do business or we interact with our suppliers? The most important thing, the first thing, is clarity of vision. We see that a lot of suppliers are trying to do a lot of things with small resources. Yes, we'll talk about lean later on, but lean does not mean that you are going to throw many balls in the air and you decide that, no, I'm only focused on one. That is not lean. Right? So you have to select your capability. And if you're good at something, rather grow that capability or that capacity instead of bringing in other things that might eventually regress what you've already achieved. And also the measures. Yes, we understand that, for example, large organizations, they're very good in KPIs, but every single organization, small business, you have to have your own internal. Of course, you'll have some KPIs focusing internally, but you also have to have some KPIs focusing externally. We do good on that because very often those KPIs are given to us by our customers. But if we're able to constantly support and to be consistent in our service, we have to focus internally as well. And we'll later on a little bit talk about that. And that's why it's very, very important to be authentic about your own organization, and especially leaders here. So sometimes organizations, I mean, we had incidences where we said to this organization, perhaps the CEO, who's obviously the director, is a risk to the organization, right? So it does not mean that if you are, for example, and maybe here's something to think about. Does it mean that if you are the founder of an organization, naturally you must become the CEO? You can be the major shareholder, right? But as an individual, you might not have the right even personality to become the CEO. Maybe you are very good as an engineer, right? I might be good as a COO, as a head of operation, but I might need somebody else to run the office of the CEO. And to try to do both, sometimes it does not work. So you have to be authentic in terms of your skills and capability, but often even availability of your own internal resources to focus on other things. Perhaps you brought a company to a certain level, you might need something else or somebody else different to take your organization to the next level. This is a very difficult one for directors and CEOs of small businesses, right? We often want to make all the decisions in the organization, but leaders must allow themselves to be led as well. One of the skills that many leaders had to learn very, very hard is the capacity to listen. We often are very, very good at giving instruction, giving commands, but we do not have our ears in all the corners of our organizations, or even worse, we do not have ears in every single house of our clients or building of our clients. Someone else has, but do we ever reflect and solicit information? So, and very often we say, but he didn't tell me or she didn't tell me. But very often we have not created a conducive environment for that communication to be solicited, right? Very often meetings are chaired by the CEO, set agenda, very little input in terms of what we want to discuss on this agenda. Even what the drivers see on the road. If your driver is the first person that sees the customer on the other side, we lose very valuable information if we are not able to gather that information back to our own organization and on how we can improve. So never run this journey alone. So if you find yourself, like many entrepreneurs do, working late hours at night, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, alone trying to resolve problems, and something definitely has gone wrong. So encourage openness in your organization. And what I really like, you hear people say networking, but use the networking for research. So I see Mem Sunda is about to chase me out here. So I'm gonna quickly go to the part of ethics, if you allow me just 2 minutes. Okay, thank you, Mem Sunda. So I'm just quickly gonna go to the area of ethics. For me, it's very, very important that continuous learning and improvement becomes what drives your own organization, right? Simple targets of saying, what can we do different from what we did last week? If it was good and it's worth keeping, let's keep it, right? But soliciting that feedback from not just our clients, because we've become quite good by soliciting information from our clients, but what about our internal staff? So very quickly, 3 things very, very important. Never change what you believe, your values. When we talk about increasing, stopping, reflecting, that's your knowledge, right? Very often SMEs, the knowledge sits with individuals, does not sit in a central point elsewhere in the organization, so that when anybody comes in, they know that what drives this organization and all the trade secrets are available to somebody else. They cannot be hosted in someone's brains, right? They have to be shared in the organization. Be fair and transparent in our practices. We know many suppliers and especially small businesses, because we're trying to cut costs down, maximize our profits. For example, the accidents that we are seeing on the roads, and especially on the N3, many of them are caused by someone who's been told that if you do 10 trips, this is how much you're going to get, right? Because we've done a KPI that says, well, speed limit does not matter. What matters is how many trips you can take, and then we create issues. So be transparent in our practices, but remember that compliance, and I know someone will be talking about that, so I'm not gonna say much about that. But many companies had to close down, but they started with a commitment. For example, I put SARS for a very good reason. One organization, they started with owing SARS 10,000 over 6 months. That ended up with about 250,000. They had to close shop, right? And when SARS demanded, please never pay SARS first before you pay yourself. You'll be happy. Then lastly, those suppliers that we are dealing with, please always remember that there is someone else on the other side. If someone else who says, I represent supply chain, I have a very, very good contract for you, but there is that brown box that needs to be opened and refilled, please remember that you have someone to talk to. We need to get rid of these people outside of supply chain. They must be exposed. At least we've managed to expose quite a few in recent times. But please do not feel that you are really alone. We have managed to support a few SMEs that found themselves in a very awkward situation. And especially because they were a subcontractor to the main contractor. So if you find yourself that you are being challenged, please never feel that you don't know where to go. As a supply chain council, I'm sure there are things that we can do to assist your organization, but also look internally as well in terms of how you deal with your suppliers as well, or your contractors as well. I'm sure that your organizations will remain sustainable. And many organizations, once the director is listed on a National Treasury database, that's it with the organization. You are not going to have any other businesses. Yes, you will be kicked out of public sector, but the next thing will be private sector. So be very careful about our behavior when we're doing business, especially with our supply chain professionals or those people that are giving you contracts.
Thank you so much. No, Olizo, thank you so much, Mr. Mampane. I think the conversations and the topics are very broad. Ladies and gentlemen, I am aware of the conversations that are happening in the chat groups, and I thank Gerard from RFA making sure that, you know, he's sending contact details to certain people, and also Mark, you know, stepping in there. There are obviously conversations that are specific to South Africa. I think it was Lekhokonola that talked about enterprise supply development, and I do know that as we go ahead, you know, into the 24th and the 25th of October, we will look into those things. I also see a number of people saying, yo, I just started up, you know, I have a particular truck. And typical SMEs, you know, it's more about, can I just get a client? Can I just get a client? And the rationale, part of the rationale about, you know, us starting in this particular direction, it's really a pastel exercise, you know, in any thing that you in the business that you're in, even in you growing in road freight, we all have to understand the political landscape, the economic landscape, the social landscape, the technological triggers, the legal and the environment, which is like your ESG, and the legal, which is your compliance. So that is what's forming how we are starting this journey to October. And I'm going to ask you all, you know, them that are you know, wanting to talk about, I need a client today, you know, just to take it all in, to say we are going somewhere, there's the end in mind, and we need to understand all the different elements, you know, the pastel framework in growing my SME in the road freight industry. With that said, we're going to move into a topic that I think we're even going to really unpack in October, which is what I call the risk relationship between compliance, sustainability, and the cost of corruption. So when you start up, oftentimes, you know, all you just need is a client because you've got bills to pay, and, you know, you're just trying to break, you know, out of the cycle of poverty for some people, or some of you just start and you're in a family business, and sooner or later, as you get to, you know, you're now running a fleet of 20 trucks or 30 trucks, you are hit with different levels of compliance regulations, and sustainability becomes a very key thing, you know, for your business. And then you are dealing with, amongst the many challenges, for instance, if we look into South Africa as a case study of electricity, or the fuel prices, or the tax constraints, the bargaining council, all of that, then you're going to be dealing with what one of our biggest challenges is in our country is corruption. And there is a cost of corruption to the growth of SMEs. So, ladies and gentlemen, could we help, you know, welcome Prof, I call her Prof or Doc, you know, Luke from the University of Johannesburg, which is a professor in the transport and supply chain management, for her just to start unpacking the different aspects of this risk relationship, because it's a very highly risky industry that, you know, we are all in. And it's very important for you to understand the compliance, the sustainability element, and also the cost of corruption in all of that. And that speaks to the ethics and the good governance that Kamohelo was also, speaking about. I just thought Kamohelo was going to start doing a strategic leadership lecture. I don't know whether I was the only one that thought so. Can we please welcome Prof? Oh, there she is. I'm sure, Harry, you can put her slides on. Thank you so much, Prof.
Yes, thank you very much. I think let's just wait for the slides. Okay, so thank you very much, Florence. It's actually a real privilege to be part of this initiative, and I think it's so important within what we're trying to achieve in South Africa and the South African economy. So when Florence asked me to speak briefly about this topic, I've sort of looked at what myself and my colleagues have researched and taught over the years, and I thought I could put something together. But the reality is that no matter how much we think we know about compliance, sustainability, corruption, it's usually not enough. It's changing all the time, and it's actually just a moving target. So no matter how big or small, we always have to aim extremely carefully if we're going to manage this in this business. So Harry, can you change slides? I'd like to just start with compliance, and I've just listed a couple of things here, but this is maybe one of the easiest parts to describe. It is, after all, just ensuring that you comply with the regulatory environment. But as small businesses, we need to constantly be aware of these kind of regulations, and this is not actually easy. In fact, quite the opposite. It's an absolute minefield. So we need to make sure that we're familiar with aspects such as your various business requirements, your company registration, your VAT registration, all of those kind of things. You need to make sure that you're familiar with employee law. And, if you're not familiar with employee law, then you are going to have issues with bargaining councils, unions, etc., CCMA. So, you really need to make sure that these are all things that you've looked at. The triple BEE requirements, these are constantly changing. And, as small businesses, we think that we're often exempt from many of them. But, as you grow your business, this also becomes a factor with which you need to take into account. Our accounting and our taxes, how do we comply with this? Driver regulations, the licenses, the permits, and that, of course, we will also look at from a perspective of corruption, because all of these are interrelated. Your vehicle registration requirements, your roadworthy certificates, your cross-border requirements, even your FICA requirements, your ARTO requirements, and particularly your customer requirements. One of the previous speakers mentioned that they are often setting KPIs for you. So what do they need? What are their standards and documentation and pre-trip inspections and cleanliness? And bearing in mind that if you are operating a trucking company, you should also think that whoever your client is, you're often at the coalface of representing that client. So they would want to see those that you comply with certain basic standards in providing that link between the customer and the final customer and the client. There are, of course, a lot of things that I haven't mentioned here, such as voluntary compliance with various ISO standards, things like the RTMS. And this also just makes sense to you from a risk perspective, is that voluntary compliance gives you assurance to your clients of the standards that you're maintaining in your business. So it is really a minefield in itself. Can we have the next slide, please? So compliance is just really the beginning. very often we also hear the term sustainability, and I've decided here just to put an initial definition, because when we first heard this term sustainability, it was as far back as 1987, and they talked about sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, this sort of is a common definition and it rolls off the tongue easily, but we need to look at it not so much as an abstract concept, but more about how we're going to ensure that our businesses are able to survive. And this is really what it is. The road freight sector, I think, is extremely difficult for this. I know that there are profits to be made, but also we know that road freight is a cutthroat business and the margins can be extremely thin. So we know that road freight businesses are usually being squeezed on prices, but it's particularly prevalent with SMMEs when you're competing with big businesses who have cost benefits associated with economies of scale, as well as a far broader range of resources available to them. So often this sort of pressure leads to cutting costs in areas such as maintenance. It's very easy to do, but from a risk management perspective, unfortunately, this is exactly the opposite of making sure that your businesses are sustainable. We don't want to be in a situation where we're working for bread and butter alone. And if the vehicle isn't working for some reason, then our businesses also can't function. So we need to go beyond that, and we need to put together a sustainable business model. If we don't do this, our businesses are likely to fail. And this means that if we're too reliant on single sources, we can think about our businesses eating themselves. So if the vehicle fails, then our business also fails. And this is precisely the sort of risk that we need to think about managing. Next slide, please. So we need to think about, as well as one of the risks is the corruption and the cost of corruption. Now, I think it's a little bit of a difficult one to tackle, because we know that it's widespread and it's endemic, and it's actually almost impossible to avoid the costs that are associated with corruption. I think we all see that in our day-to-day lives, in the effect it's had on electricity, for example, but also the effect it's had on the state of our infrastructure, such as potholes, etc. So the road freight sector, I think we find particularly relevant issues related to this. And I think it's fairly common knowledge that there are corruption issues associated with obtaining licenses and permits, with being stopped for traffic violations, moving goods across borders. There are hundreds of examples that I could cite here. And these are really the most difficult issues to confront. And how do we manage these? Because we have to accept with risk that when we look at what risks we're facing, we need to look at how relevant are those risks? How likely are those risks? And I'll discuss that in a moment, but there are certain things that are impossible to avoid. And to such an extent, sometimes in the road freight industry, we think that we cannot avoid corruption to such an extent that sometimes it seems impossible to function without being part of the system. We also need to be aware of the fact that road freight businesses are faced with other forms of corruption, such as pilferage, fuel theft, collusion, and these can happen within our own company, no matter how small you are, no matter how familiar you are. Of course, external to the country, these are all part and or external to the company, they're all part and parcel of the aspects that we are facing. But we also have to accept that being part of these systems and everything that we do has associated costs, impacts, and consequences. So we need to find ways in which we can run our business, stay above board, make profits, and secure future businesses, because this is, after all, what sustainability is all about. So we need to consider every aspect of our businesses, the impact they might have on our reputation, our potential profits, our longevity, and our customers, who will ultimately determine whether we survive and succeed. And to this end, we need to look at the risk we are likely to encounter in our businesses and to think about how we manage that risk. Can I have the next slide, please? So what then is risk management? And there's surely many definitions for risk management, but we can typically consider this as the forecasting and evaluation of financial and other risks, together with the identification of procedures or actions that can be taken to minimize those risks. Now, I think that that's probably quite easy to say, but getting to a point where you can actually identify risks is already quite a daunting task. And I think as small businesses, the idea of doing risk management and identifying these risks, I mean, how do we even start to do it? And, often we think about it as something that's done by, big companies with big resources who can afford the skills, can dedicate the time to formal processes, money to formal processes, to think about these risks and mitigation actions. But as much as we can say big businesses face huge risks, we can also be reasonably assured that small businesses face just as many risks. And some might argue that these risks actually carry a far greater weight, because if anything serious happens in a small business, it may very well be the end of your business. So we really need to think about how we can manage this in our businesses. Now, there are, of course, many different ways to do risk management, and in fact, at the university, we conduct, we even have courses on risk management. In fact, you can go as far as to do an honors degree, for example, in these kind of things. But this is, of course, often beyond the scope of small business owners. So, you need to be able to think about, from a simple perspective, is the issues that you're likely to face, identifying them, what are they, and how will you deal with these. And critical is to think about what it is, and that you have a plan to be able to deal with it. So realistically, you have to go through a process which enables you to identify the risks in the first place. Now, there are many ways of doing this. I think I've mentioned enrolling for courses, but of course you can have brainstorming sessions. You could enroll for short courses. You can even look at free online courses. You could join small business forums. You can even form your own small business forums. These can be virtual or physical. You can conduct SWOT analyses. There's many, many different ways of doing this, but the important part is that you identify as many risks as you possibly can. So for example, if we're starting a business, we know that we have to register our businesses. This is a foregone conclusion. What is the risk in that? Is not being able to do it correctly. So we recognize this as a risk that is going to happen. We understand, for example, that punctures will occur. It's a risk and we need to manage it. So how do we think about managing it? The next step is, of course, the categorization of the risks. And there's two real things that we need to look at. The first is the likelihood that the risk occurs in the first place. And very often we will look at the risks. I mean, if I look at a risk of a puncture, I'm going to say that not every truck, or you will not have a puncture on every trip, but you know that you will have a puncture. So it's a risk and there's a high chance of it happening. So we look at the likelihood of it happening. We need to register our business, and there's a chance that we don't do this correctly, or we need to pay our taxes and there's a chance that we haven't done this correctly. So recognize your risks and recognize the chance of them happening. But in addition to that, so we would generally speaking, when we look at this likelihood of it happening, we would generally try and classify it into something that has a small likelihood of happening, has a medium likelihood of happening, has a very high likelihood of happening. But in addition to that, then we need to look at the level of the impact. So sometimes you might have something that has a very high risk of happening, but the impact on the business might not be that high. So, or something that has a very low risk of happening, but if it does happen, so we can mitigate everything and say that we've got excellent drivers, we've got a vehicle that is in a good condition, so the likelihood of the truck seizing is going to be very low, but the impact, if it does seize, is going to be extremely high. So what we need to then do is to look at where we need to concentrate our efforts in terms of risk management. So we want to really look at the ones which are likely to have a high impact on our business and that are likely to happen. So we can look at it in terms of prioritizing your risks and categorizing them and prioritizing them. The next thing is, of course, to look at your mitigation aspects. And there's a number of different ways to mitigate those risks. I mean, typically we can think of avoidance. And this is not always that easy, but for example, you can avoid vehicle damage and accidents if you don't send your trucks out during severe hailstorms. It's something that we can avoid that particular action on that day, but it's not always that easy to do, and it's not always practical. There are some risks which I think we simply cannot avoid. So what we would try and do is aim at loss prevention and reduction and manage them as far as we can. So, for example, we can minimize the risk of punctures by ensuring that we have good tires, that we inspect them regularly, that we replace them when they're supposed to be replaced at the right times, etc. But there will always be times when, regardless of whatever you've done, you're still going to have a puncture. So this is something that will happen at some point. It's we reduce the possibility, but we then think about what do we do in this kind of situation. Sometimes we just go as far as simply retaining the risk. We accept that this is going to happen, but we put in our own actions to be able to mitigate against it. So in the tire case, we understand that a puncture will happen, but maybe the cost of insuring those tires for those occasional happenings, and I'm not talking about your regular tire replacement, but I'm talking about your extraordinary tire replacement. So the cost of insuring that might be too high. So we could retain the risk by ensuring that we have funds or stock available to replace it in the case of emergency. And I think one of the previous speakers also spoke about making sure that you spend 30% or whatever the case may be on making sure that you have this kind of thing available, what we'd essentially term a form of self-insurance, which is then retaining the risk for yourself. Sharing the risk is also a possibility. So, for example, if you're contracted to a client company for the provision of transport services, you can think about what kind of risk can be carried by the client. Can your client help you with various forms of compliance? And what sort of risks are you carrying yourself? So, for example, and I see in the comments that there's lots about getting clients and ESDs and so on. And really the point of that would be something about sharing the risks that are inherent in these kind of arrangements. So, for example, your client may want to provide a guarantee of a minimum number of kilometers in your contract. So therefore, ensuring that you can still make your truck payments at the end of the month, even if you didn't travel quite enough kilometers. So this is an example of sharing the risks. Lastly, you can transfer the risk, and you can do this, for example, through a contract. We can outsource our accounting function, for example, so that the risk of tax and business compliance resides with the accounting firm. Similarly, we can contract a tire company to replace tires as the need arises. You know, we need to think about all of these things, but ultimately, although you can transfer the risk, ultimately you are responsible for the risk to your business. So it doesn't mean washing your hands of the responsibility, but it also means that you can allow the professionals to provide the services that you cannot do yourself, accepting that, you know, you could have a lot of knowledge about business and tracking, but you cannot possibly be all things within any business. So, you know, transfer the risk where you can, seek and work with excellent partners. So I think ultimately we know that there are hundreds of risks in a small business. We need to comply with numerous laws and regulations, some of which we are not even aware of. We need to manage the possibility of all sorts of corruptions, both within and external to the organization. We need to ensure that our businesses, despite all the risks that we are facing, are going to survive and continue to succeed. Harry, can we have the next slide, please? So risk management is absolutely essential, whether you think about it or whether you're thinking about doing it or not thinking about doing it. It's absolutely essential. And we know that risks are a moving target. As soon as you think you've mitigated one risk, another will arise. It's an ongoing exercise. So in my mind, whenever we think about whether we know how to do risk management or whether we're actually going to sit down and do a risk management exercise, we should also think about the fact that not doing risk management might be the riskiest thing that you can possibly do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that very detailed. I thank you. I felt like I was at a free short course on risk management. Thank you so much, Prof, on that. And I think there's just so much more that we can talk about regarding risk management, even on compliance and sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, when you do go onto the website, you're going to see the list of the different topics that we're going to be uncovering, even in the master classes that are that are technical, that have to do with the operation of running your organization, and that are specific, to road freight SMEs. So with that, I'm just going to move to, we don't have much time. We will be done at 12. I'm going to move to Mr. Oliver Naidu, who's the head of adjudication for the awards, and how these awards are going to, what are the categories and what is the process? When you do go on the website, which is live, you can even start nominating, your business and sending through your details now. You can go through, you can click on awards and nomination, and everything is there and it's live. But without any waste of time, Oliver, are you here just for you to take us through the different categories, the requirements, and the process? Here we go. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Florence, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, I think the previous speakers, Florence, have made my job very easy. They've spoken about all the nice, important stuff, hey? Harry, you're going to let me share my screen, please?
You can share.
Thanks, Harry. I'm going to run through this fairly quickly because of time, but also because of the fact that most of the other presenters have already touched on some of the key aspects. What I would like to touch on in a bit more detail is my last slide, which talks through the different categories of the SME awards, and specifically, what are we looking for? As you've heard, we need to empower SMEs. We need to give them recognition for the efforts. So I'd like to touch on what are the criteria that one would need to consider when submitting. But for now, you've heard this morning about the role and the journey of SMEs. And it's important for us as SMEs to ensure that in our businesses, from a very early stage, we're building in strategy. And that would mean that we've got to start thinking, what systems can we use? How can we define our processes? And one often has sometimes a misperception that we need to have highly complex software and advanced systems, but not true. As an SME rather, the degree of complexity, the formality and efficiency of your system depends on your environment. So if you've got one truck, the way in which you manage your systems would differ substantially from a transporter with 100 trucks or 20 trucks, for example. So we've got to start somewhere. And in the next couple of slides, I want to just quickly, kind of in a way, summarize or consolidate what previous speakers have mentioned. So having systems, right? And this is about compliance systems. It's about having processes that are robust, resilient, and that can enable us as SMEs to get a foot in the door and to build our reputation. So how do we use systems to make sure we are profitable? You cannot be sustainable if you do not make a profit. How do we protect our brand as a transporter or as a business? How do we ensure service delivery? Ultimately, we live or die by our ability to meet the need of the client. Safety performance is critical. We heard, I think Florence mentioned that the contribution of transporters to the economy is around 270 billion. Of that, roughly 4 billion is lost to the economy from crashes and collisions. So how do we as SMEs prevent not just loss of life, loss of brand reputation, but how do we ensure that our safety performance does not hinder our market penetration? Governance. I mean, the Prof spoke in an introduction about sustainable businesses and about the need for good governance. And this is crucial. In days gone by, governance was a term associated with the corporates, with the leading companies. But as time goes on, we are seeing more and more principals are expecting good governance from SMEs in the supply chain. So having systems and building compliance, building in defined processes enables one to compete, right? And the Prof again mentioned ISO standards, and worldwide we see that there's compelling evidence that ISO management systems are a key driver for sustainable businesses. I used to do a lot of work in my previous company, supplying the German automotive industry. And in that sector, unless you're ISO certified, you don't have any chance of getting into the market, because they see ISO certification as an indicator of a reputable, reliable, a high-quality supplier to the industry. And even in our country, we're seeing more and more ISO certification becoming a prerequisite on some of the RFQs. Just a quick snapshot. South Africa, in the little red shaded block there, you can see we are quite far behind other economies we compete against in terms of ISO 9001 certification. So yes, we have lots to do. And as SMEs, we've got to really get into the idea of systems building our businesses. Now, some of the speakers, I think Kamokelo mentioned it, Mark mentioned it earlier, and they spoke about the challenges of doing business as an SME, one of which is leadership. So these systems and standards, they compel one to have a defined policy or procedure as to how does leadership of your SME translate into the planning? How does one as a leader or business owner support the operations? How do you evaluate your performance? And then how do you, in a cyclical manner, right, ensure that all your customer needs, the needs of interested and affected parties, are all taken into account, built into your system, so that one can deliver the output, which is customer satisfaction and continual improvement of your business. And in another kind of depiction, it's commonly referred to in the certification world as the PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, and then act. Again, underscoring the critical importance of a systemic approach to businesses. And as SMEs, it's something which we've seen is often severely lacking. And if we want to play catch up, we've got to start thinking structured systems, defined policies, monitoring, measurement, and really taking ownership of what we do and building on that. So in this model, we must as SMEs plan, we must implement or execute those plans, analyze, measure, monitor, and depending on what we find there, alter our course of direction so that we are on the track that leads to profitability and sustainability. And then translating these higher level strategy documents into on-the-road performance is often a challenge. So this picture just hopes to illustrate that we must translate strategy into meaningful outputs on the road. So things like driver ID, how do you monitor your payload or weight? How do you ensure your fuel is managed? And that's I could talk at length about fuel management. It's the most critical resource of a transporter, the biggest input cost. And if you do not manage your fuel consumption, you're on a hiding to nothing, especially in the current economy. The same with tires, and maybe I shouldn't spend too much of time because I know we are running out of time. These are the kinds of policies and procedures that we would encourage an SME to adopt or think about as part of their development. On the ground, Mark mentioned, if your truck breaks down, you cannot deliver, and it hurts us as SMEs incredibly hard, right? So having a system like this, where you are having a schedule for preventive maintenance, having a defined tire management system. So how often do you check your inflation pressure, your tread depth? All of these add significant value to the bottom line. If your tires aren't inflated correctly, beside the obvious risk of puncture and safety, the truck needs to expend more fuel because it's got a higher rolling resistance because of low inflation pressure. So all these key indicators, or rather key criteria, if they're not addressed, if they're not implemented, it hurts us as SMEs. Vehicle pre-trip inspections, I mean, who can afford a truck to stand for 4 hours? If we don't ensure the safety of the truck prior to departure, again, it is a massive risk and one that we need to guard against. So, Florence, I know I've got 2 minutes, I'm concluding now. There are various systems we believe would add value to SMEs. One, how do we, so it's all about risk management. As the Prof mentioned, it's your risk matrix. In other words, understanding what are your risks, quantifying them, putting in preventive or control measures, and assessing. So in the performance or compliance framework, we look at ISO 45001, which looks at how do we manage the risks so our people are protected. And this talks to health and safety as well. ISO 14001, how do we manage our businesses and our trucks and our wash bays and our workshops so that we do not damage the environment or cause undue damage on the environment. ISO 9001, which is the world's most popular standard, helps us to manage our risks and processes so we can fulfill and deliver on customer expectations. And of course, our local RTMS standard, which helps us to manage our road safety risk, it protects our road networks from premature degradation, and it helps us in terms of transport efficiency. So 9001 is a quality standard, 14,000 is environmental, 45 is health and safety, and there are RTMS and a few others which I will skip because of our time constraints. So, colleagues, all of these standards and systems and compliance requirements, there's often an incorrect perception that they are constraining businesses. But the converse is true. If you build on these platforms, you take into account your impact on society, you protect the environment, and it has an effect on one's profitability. And all of those factors ultimately are what will drive our sustainability as an SME. So coming now to the awards, and Florence, I think it's awesome what you have started, and I think there's need for discussion, there's need for recognition. As I was driving to work this morning, I thought about primary school when I was there in early 70s, so that's giving away my age. But how many of you remember when your teacher took out that sticker, the gold star, and put that sticker on your little exercise book? Made you feel good, right? Certainly made me feel good, and it motivated me to do better. So I think one of the hopes we have with the summit and the awards is to give those little gold stars to deserving SMEs, to motivate them and to motivate the broader SME road freight sector to say, hey guys, how can we do things better? How can we improve our performance? How can we get more market penetration? So we need to, in step one, we are opening applications on the website, and that is road freight, sorry, I can't see here now. That is SME Road Freight Summit.co.za. So if you want to enter, log on to the website, complete your information. You need to also attach supporting documents. So for example, if you are RTMS certified, you'd attach a certificate. It's not compulsory requirement, but it would certainly help. If you're ISO certified, attach those documents. Submit testimonials from clients. Ultimately, the asset test, or one of the key asset tests, how did your client engage with you, and how do they perceive your business? So as part of your application, submit testimonials, submit motivations of the positives you've achieved in your business. And speaking of positives, we will also be announcing at the award ceremony in October, I think, the winners. And Florence has kept secret the fact that there'll be some awesome prizes. And these prizes will be announced in July. We are partnering with some leading corporates who are going to sponsor some fantastic prizes. So hopefully that will whet your appetite to get those applications in. And finally, my last slide now. I've done well here, Florence. My last slide is there's 6 categories. One is for best technology. So if you've done something different, if you've innovatively introduced a project, we want to hear about it. Excellence in customer service. Best SME Safety Award. Best fleet, and here we look at the vehicle condition, we look at your preventive maintenance schedule, we look at tire management, and so on. Training and development, we know that we've heard sadly we have, I think, an excessively, in fact, untenably high number of crashes, and a large part of that is due to driving behavior and lack of adequate resources. So what we'd like to encourage is to showcase good examples of training and development and give an award recognizing exceptional performance. And the last category is Driver of the Year. And here we're looking at tangible evidence of leading performance. For example, number of accidents per million kilometers. So we want to try and have a quantifiable basis for issuing the award to obviously give recognition, but also to ensure we have a fairly objective way of recognizing our leading performers in the SME sector. So it promises to be an exciting event. I'm very excited about it because I think we all realize, colleagues, we've got to do something in our industry to change the face of road safety. We know that we lose lives daily, the high crash rates. It's costing us in more ways that we can imagine, not just our sector, but the economy at large. And this initiative, I believe, is one that will stir up the conversation and I believe will have a meaningful impact on changing our current poor road safety record. So thanks, Florence. Over to you now.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you so much for that. I think I'm grateful that you added the other slides and you didn't just come straight here because it gives the rationale to the awards. Last year when I did the South African Freight Awards, it was interesting as to how many of the people that were recognized actually got access to market. I got quite great testimonials, which we'll be sharing, towards October. Without any waste of time, I'm going to ask three of our advisory council members just to share their word of support. I think I'm going to start with Alex Potgieter, who's the CEO of the Global Federation of Business Chambers. Then I'm going to ask Mr. Mpho, who's the Executive Commercial Director at Isuzu, just to get himself ready as well. And then we're going to finish up with Lebu. Just give us 5 more minutes of your time, guys. We are landing this plane very, very quickly. Mr. Alex, sir, just your parting shots of support.
Program Director, Advisory Council members, participants and presenters, well done. Really informative and insightful. It's both an honor and privilege to complement and support the overall objectives. From access networks, supply chain efficiencies through innovative financial mechanisms, building business as our core with defined SME programs are a key imperative for the success of this strategic platform, speaking to the Road Freight SME Summit objectives. Program Director has discussed at our pre-meeting this last week, running up to today's session and post, we have a lot of work to do. We pledge our support to meet all expectations in furthering success in terms of playing our part as a neutral and non-political business enabler and accelerator. Our Business Economic Climate series, together with our Building Strong series, speaks to the underlying platform we create across all industries to ensure economic growth. This we achieve through our Business Economic Gateway as a formal structure to assist the sector. Appreciate the onboarding of our federation and, like I said, support the objectives as a whole. We thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, for your support. And I'm sure when you're seeing people saying, yeah, business support, you're like, we have really have quite very exciting things lined up in making sure that even this platform is sustainable for years to come. Mr. Mpho from Isuzu, sir, are you here? I know you're supposed to be here. I can't see you on my screen.
I am here.
Oh, yes, now I can see you. Hi, Mpho. Thank you so much,
Hi,
sir.
good afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for everybody attending this summit. And it's very crucial from our side as Isuzu Motors South Africa to be part of this, and we are very proud to be in this session with you all. A little bit about Isuzu Motors South Africa. It was started in 2018. After the exit of General Motors South Africa. However, the product have been in South Africa for a very long time. Some of you are old enough to remember the Chevrolet Love, which it was really sitting on the platform of Isuzu Bakkie. So as a commercial vehicle suppliers, we supply the Bakkies and the trucks. And this Bakkie has been a #1 Bakkie in South Africa for a very long time in terms of the workhorses. And on the truck side, we've been #1 truck for the past 10 years rolling. We are a societal brand, and that's why we find it very good to be partnering with Road Freight, especially the SME. We have very good stories that we can tell about supporting entrepreneurs into SMEs and also becoming the conglomerate that they are very good story that if anybody have a chance can read the Supergroup story where they started with one of our Isuzu bakkies. Many speakers have touched on the cost of downtime and inconveniencing of that. We see ourselves as an after-sales business that happens to sell trucks. Really, because you only make or generate revenue and profit when those wheels are rolling. So in partnering with SMEs, we offer advice on what is the right truck for the application. I saw Mr. Pedorali is on the line here. What we say quite often is when you specify a truck, you start from the back, not from the hood, not from the front, so that you're offering a truck that is right for the application, so that your cost of operation makes sense for the type of business that you are doing. So we're very much in support of SMEs. And lastly, we are an OEM, however, we don't own a bank. We have partnered and have a joint venture with one of the South African banks where we have an organization standing alone called Isuzu Finance. And through this organization, we have launched a product to support SMEs to acquire transport solution. It is on its infant stage. We've just launched it. We have narrowed that to simple operation on the 4-tonners, 5-tonners, and 8.5 tonners, drop side, and van bodies. It's a product called EasyGo. You can visit your closest dealership that will be able to tell you a lot more about that. Partnering with road freight, especially with the SME, is really in support of our ethos as Isuzu Motors South Africa, where we say we support you for the long run. Our payoff line says, with you for the long run. Thank you very much and all the best to everybody around here. And if you have more questions, we always available, myself and together with the whole Isuzu Motors dealer network to support you in the transportation solution that you might require. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It sounded like we're just about to do like a sales advert for Isuzu Motors. I don't think I'm the only one that would, so you just got it right. And then lastly, I'm going to ask for Miss Lebo Letsualo, if you can just switch on your camera for your word of support. There she is, the lady that does a lot of work for women in trucking in South Africa. You can unmute, ma'am.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, or is it still good morning? Florence, thank you for allowing me to be part of this beautiful program and part of this beautiful journey towards the Freight Summit. From our side, colleagues, we really pride ourselves to be part of this program and being on the advisory board for the summit. I fully believe that from AWISCA, when we started 7 years ago around looking at functional mentorship and coaching in transport, it's always about having growth, having sustainability, having market linkages in the industry. We understood the importance of transport sector being one of the most crucial sectors in the economy in really driving all the other economic sectors. So with that, we understand that this Freight Summit is really bringing all of these areas where we believe that coaching and mentorship will really be the result of growth and building the technical skills of all the emerging businesses. And we understand as rewarding as well as you do well, then you have to be rewarded. And with the awards that are coming up, we really support and pledge and request that all of you guys there as emerging business, you become part of this important summit, become part of the awards function as well, because you have to be rewarded for the good work that you are doing. Always remember that with everything that you do in transport sector, it's about safety. It's about ensuring that you get freight right at the right time. With the POF that is merged by the big clients, we want to make sure as well that we give a bit of allowance and understanding to the big organizations as well to be utilized in the emerging businesses that we are working with. So Florence, we really from AWISCA, on behalf of AWISCA, on behalf of ThinkPoint as well, we support the Freight Summit. We want to see the success of it, and we will ensure that we see all the emerging organizations that are part of this having the best benefit out of it and having a collaborative effort to their growth. So thank you and all the best and well done on this initiative.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lizolo. Thank you. So quickly, just 3 more minutes as we round off. I just want to thank all my advisory council members. I would like to thank Harry, the Transport Forum. I would also want to thank Ms. Catherine Locken, who is our PR and communications partner. If you know Catherine, shout out to her. I just also want to thank, everybody that has presented today, everybody that has joined today. So after the thank yous, I just would, here are the details. The summit is taking place on the 24th and the 25th of October at the Maslow in Sandton. We all have that, right? Harry, if you may, perhaps you can give again my contact details slide so that people can have my email. The website is www.roadfreight-sme-summit.co.za. There is all the information you need. You're going to find it on there. There are opportunities to sponsor the summit. There are opportunities also for you to send through, some people in the audience are experts in the industry and they would like to present on certain topics. There is an opportunity for you to do that. And ladies and gentlemen, lastly, it is going to be at a cost of 2,000 rands, including VAT. So hence I'm launching 3.5 months before for people that want to be there. And I do not personally think that 2,000 rands, including VAT, is a lot of money for you to come and learn and build, and be part of this ecosystem that we are building for SMEs in the road freight industry. Lastly, just keep on looking out for all our communication. We will be continuing certain things with the Transport Forum. We will be on social media. Please also follow us on our LinkedIn page, and you are more than welcome to email me, Florence, and info, the admin, regarding the summit. To the sponsors and the partners that have agreed to be on board right now, I thank you. And I think, unfortunately, there's not a lot of time for Q&As, but I think there aren't a lot of questions. There were a lot of comments just asking about when this is. You can also follow, the speakers on LinkedIn. You can reach out to them. The presentations will be made available for you, as Harry has said. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, I thank you for attending the first ever Road Freight SME Summit Launch 2023, where our theme is resilience. I thank Osman from Osman Mura. He's joined all the way from Ghana. So who knows, next time we'll do this in Accra, because he's saying there's a lot of similarities with people in Ghana. And I thank the chairperson of the advisory board, Mark Makubalo. Thank you so much, sir. Resilience, the ability to bounce back. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you and I look forward to meeting you all. Make the arrangements, book at the hotel. It's going to be a fantastic 2 days where we are starting a community that's going to collaborate, help each other, and making sure that we remain resilient and we thrive in this industry. Thank you so much, Harry.